When you think of the American heartland, what comes to mind? Probably rolling fields of corn, right? Generations of family farmers. Well, that picture-perfect image, it's fading. Today, we're going to dive into a massive shift that's totally reshaping rural America. We'll be using Iowa as our main example to see how the very soul of the heartland is, well, being hollowed out.
And this isn't just some abstract economic story. It's incredibly personal. This quote from an Iowa farmer, man, it just cuts right to the heart of it. It's about losing your neighbors, watching your community unravel. It really captures the human cost of this whole thing.
For centuries, this was the dream, right? The independent farmer, the steward of their own land. But over the last 50 years or so, especially in places like Iowa, that ideal has been taken apart, piece by piece. So you have to ask, what happened? What kind of force is powerful enough to hollow out the very core of American agriculture?
To really get our heads around this change, we need some new words. And the term that seems to fit best, it's something that sounds like it's straight out of the Middle Ages: corporate feudalism.
And look, this isn't just a catchy phrase. It describes a complete overhaul of where the power lies. In this system, giant multinational agribusinesses are the new lords, and family farmers, well, they become dependent contract growers. They're working their own land, sure, but at the end of the day, not for themselves.
Okay, so check this out. What's so wild about this table is how it just maps out the parallels. The top dog isn't a lord anymore. It's a massive corporation. The main resource isn't just land. It's control over seeds, genetics, and whether you can even get your product to market. But here's the real kicker. Look at who holds the risk. Back in the day, the lord handled the big stuff. Today, the farmer takes on all the huge financial and environmental risks while the corporation rakes in the profit.
So how does this new feudalism actually play out on the ground? Let's start with the most fundamental part of farming. Who owns the land? The answer to who owns the heartland has gotten way more complicated. And, you guessed it, a lot more corporate.
Get this. Back in 1982, about 87% of Iowa's farmland was owned by traditional family units. Fast forward to 2022, and that number has crashed to just 57%. That is a huge transfer of ownership and control in a single generation.
And take a look at who the owners are. 2/3 of Iowa's farmland is now owned by people over 65. We're looking at a demographic cliff here. Experts are calling it a historically unprecedented rate of land turnover that's about to happen, which of course opens the door for even more corporate consolidation.
Here's another number that'll make your head spin. Over half of all the farmland in Iowa is owned by someone who doesn't actually farm it. This creates this huge disconnect, right? The owner mostly cares about rental income, not necessarily about the long-term health of the soil.
And this table perfectly illustrates the legal tricks behind this shift. In '82, 80% of land was held by a single owner or a couple. Today, that's down to just 50%. And where did it go? Look at the explosion in ownership through trusts and LLCs. It's transformed farmland from a family legacy into just another asset in somebody's investment portfolio.
All right, so if more and more farmers don't own the land and they're working for these giant corporations, what does that relationship actually look like? Well, that brings us to the modern production contract.
Imagine this. To even get a contract to raise hogs or chickens, a farmer often has to go into debt for over $1 million just to build these highly specialized facilities. But the contracts themselves? They can be short-term and canceled whenever the corporation feels like it, leaving the farmer with a gigantic mortgage and zero income. It's basically a system of debt bondage.
And a lot of these contracts work on what's called the tournament system. It's insidious. Farmers are paid based on how well they do compared to their neighbors. But here's the catch. The corporation controls everything. The health of the baby chicks, the quality of the feed. They can essentially rig the game to decide who wins and who loses, all while pitting neighbor against neighbor.
This system doesn't just extract wealth from farmers. It passes on enormous costs to the environment and to the rural communities themselves. There's a fancy term for it: externalizing the costs.
$333 million. That's the estimated 5-year cost for Iowa taxpayers just to clean nitrate pollution out of their drinking water. And where does that pollution come from? Overwhelmingly, it's agricultural runoff from these massive industrial-scale livestock operations.
And the costs are way more than just dollars and cents. Nitrate pollution is a serious public health crisis. It's been linked to higher risks of cancer and birth defects. In Iowa alone, the annual medical costs tied to these illnesses are estimated to be in the tens of millions.
These are the source of the problem.
They're called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. To give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, the livestock in Iowa generate the same amount of waste as a city of 168 million people. That's more than 50 times the state's actual human population, and most of it goes untreated.
The economic damage is just as obvious. As these industrial farms buy their supplies from national chains, that money just gets sucked right out of the community. Local businesses can't compete. The classic American Main Street, it gets replaced by boarded-up windows and Dollar Generals, which ironically often create food deserts right in the heart of the most fertile farmland in the world.
So here's the bottom line. When a family farm disappears, it's not just a business closing. It's a family that has to leave. That kicks off a domino effect. The population shrinks, the tax base erodes, and then you see painful school consolidations. The very social fabric of these towns just dissolves.
But this isn't the only way it has to be. Even with all this erosion, there's a really powerful counter-movement taking root. It's being led by farmers and communities who are deciding to forge a different path. This alternative is called regenerative agriculture. Instead of treating the soil like a factory floor to be exploited, the focus is all on rebuilding it. You use practices like cover crops and rotational grazing to actually restore the ecosystem. And by forming local food co-ops, farmers can cut out the corporate middlemen and take back their economic independence.
And this picture really captures the whole philosophy, doesn't it? It's about stewardship. It's about working with nature, not trying to dominate it. This approach offers a way forward that can heal not just the land, but the rural economies that are so dependent on it. So we're left with a fundamental choice, really. The path we're on now points to a future where the heartland is just a consolidated corporate factory. But another path is possible, one that's built on local communities, ecological health, and human dignity. The question is, which future are we going to choose?